Hi, it's Kevin Bates here, and this morning I would like to talk a bit about NFTs and royalties. And I think the best way to go about that is to start by looking at royalties for the visual arts in the traditional art marketplaces. So many countries have laws. One that I looked up recently was in Australia, whereby if you're a visual artist and you make a painting, the state guarantees you a royalty of 5% every time that painting is sold on. And the idea there is that as an artist, if you subsequently become famous and your art becomes incredibly valuable, you as the individual artist get to share in the increase in wealth that happens through the market deciding that your work is incredibly valuable. However, this artist royalty comes with a bunch of provisos, and the main one is that you only get paid the royalty if the artwork is sold on the open market with the involvement of an art professional. So effectively what that means is that if you make a painting and it starts changing hands in auction houses, then you'll get a share of the profits. And again, I think in Australia it's a guaranteed 5%. However, what you don't get is a share of the profits if there's a private sale or if the artwork is handed on as a gift. And this kind of makes sense because it's very hard to track down individual private sales. If somebody owns a painting and a millionaire comes around and says, I really like that, and offers some cash on the spot, how is anybody going to know that that transaction took place? Well, I guess it needs to be reported to the Inland Revenue or the tax services. But anyway, the practicalities are that the royalties are there for artists if the art is resold in a recognized auction house or through an art dealer who is registered. And this kind of carries over into the world of NFTs. You see people talking about how wonderful it would be if we could add to an NFT contract the idea of a guaranteed royalty for the artist, so that you mint your NFT and then every time the NFT is sold on, you as the artist would get a share of the sale price. However, in practice, this is pretty much impossible to achieve. And the reason for that is the only way you could enforce this resale tax is if the auction part if there was an auction contract built into the NFT contract itself. So that would kind of change the concept of owning an NFT. And in particular, it would mean that if you are the owner of an NFT and you decided to transfer it from one of your wallets to another, you would end up having to pay a tax to the artist. And that, to me personally, doesn't seem fair. That's like having to pay $100 every time you move a painting from the wall of your living room to the wall of your bedroom, say. So the way it works at the moment is that the major NFT sales platforms, such as, for example, OpenSea, offer this option of having a creator's royalty, but it only functions if the NFT is then subsequently sold and resold on that very platform. So the NFT platforms like this very much because it kind of locks, or it encourages the locking in of the buying and selling of a particular NFT in their particular platform. An artist who's going to make profit off each sale is going to want to encourage their NFT to be traded on the platform that makes them royalties. After all, that's how financial incentives work. However, the difficulty with implementing this in an actual NFT contract is that what's to stop people from having the financial transaction off to the side of the NFT transaction? It's impossible for you to tell if an NFT is transferred from one address to another, whether it's an internal transfer from where an owner isn't selling it to another owner. It's the same person but just two different addresses. However, that would look identical to them transferring it to the address of a third party, and then the third party could pay for that transfer out of band by transferring some ether back through some other channel, or by even paying, for example, for the NFT in Bitcoin or in cash, or with a bank transfer. So the dream of NFTs being able to automatically enforce a resale royalty for artists, I think, is unfortunately not feasible. Unless the NFT contained a whole load of contract stuff to enforce a payment every time you wanted to transfer the NFT. It's just not going to work. And even if you did go to all the effort of building a whole auctioning and sale contract into the NFT contract, which would make it incredibly bloated and expensive to run, there are still ways, very simple ways, that buyers and sellers could get around it, namely by conducting the transaction out of band, i.e. transferring the NFT, possibly with a small fee attached to it, and then making the huge transfer of assets on some other channel. So as is usually the case when it comes to the creative arts, the dream is there, the reality unfortunately not so wonderful. I hope you found this interesting, and I'll see you all in the next video soon. Bye for now.